The Hispanic vote was really historic this time around. I mean, when we look at the different studies that are being done, and more will be done, but at this point we think that the Hispanic vote provided President Obama with approximately 5.5% of his victory, of his margin of victory over Governor Romney. Now, what that means is that in different states, like for example, Colorado, President Obama received 80% of the Latino vote. In Ohio, it was around 82%. Florida, it was a bit lower, but across the country, President Obama received about 75% of the Hispanic Latino vote. Governor Romney received a very small marginal percentage. And of course, the question is, well, why? Why the different levels of support? And I think there are a number of different reasons. I mean, one, if you look at the history of Hispanic and Latino peoples, I mean, first of all, we're a very diverse group of individuals and groups. You know, we have different races, different ethnicities. We come in all shades and colors, you know. And I think one of the things that really activated a lot of Hispanic voters, if you look at Colorado and Ohio, for example, just take those two states. Those were swing states. Those were pivotal states. In both states, Republican attorney generals had tried to push voter ID laws. And local Hispanics interpreted those local voter ID laws as being aimed against them, as being aimed against suppressing the Hispanic vote. And so that occasioned a lot of anger among Hispanic voters in those two states in particular. So we're talking about a voter ID backlash on the one level. So that was one factor. You know, another factor was the issue of immigration and so-called immigration reform. I mean, there are a lot of Hispanic and Latinos in the United States who lack documentation. I'm third-generation Mexican-American, but my grandparents, my grandmother, actually my great-grandmother only became a naturalized citizen when she was well into her 70s, right? And so the question of immigration, of documentation, of anti-immigration legislation, which have been pushed in a lot of states and heavily identified with Republicans. The Republican Party made an enormous strategic error in the Tampa Republican Convention, because the Tampa Convention was of course, I'm talking about the National Republican Convention. What they did was the Republican Party invited a number of the worst anti-immigrant reactionaries from the state of Arizona to participate in that convention. Once they did that, they completely lost all opportunity of getting the Hispanic vote. I don't care how many Spanish language ads that President Romney was going to run from that point on. When they invited people like Governor Brewer from Arizona, who's identified by most Hispanics and Latinos as not only an adversary but an enemy of us, they lost it. And now they didn't invite those folks to be on the main stage per se, but they invited them to be in smaller kind of workshops and fundraising events. But the thing about Hispanics and Latinos that most people have got to understand is we have very long memories. We do not accept these statements that people make like, well, why don't you just get over it? Why don't you just forget about that? We have very long memories about who our friends are and who our enemies are. And so the Republican Party has a lot of work to do in terms of making up for the terrible mistakes it made in the lead up to the election. Governor Romney simply identified with too many reactionaries who really like our labor. They like our work. They love us in the chicken factories, poultry factories. They love us in the fields and picking tomatoes. But as soon as we actually have to use some services, as soon as we actually have to send our kids to school, as soon as we actually talk about having the right to vote, suddenly they hate us, you know? And so we are sophisticated enough now, and we have enough critical mass where we can begin to make decisions about which political party we want to support based on its behavior, its track record. We're well beyond the rhetoric stage. And you heard a lot of rhetoric between the president and the Governor Romney during the debates. We didn't pay attention to that. What we look at are results, outcomes, you know, what's happened 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 50 years ago. So that's just kind of a quick overview of my kind of analysis of the election.